Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at sustainable shipping. Specifically, how we measure the environmental impact of those temperature-controlled containers.
Okay.
You know, the ones that are super important for transporting things like medicine?
Yeah.
We've got a really interesting white paper from Swiss Airtainer SA.
Oh, cool.
They're a company that's right in the middle of all this, and let me tell you, this stuff gets complicated fast.
I bet.
You'd think figuring out a container's carbon footprint would be pretty straightforward.
Right.
Like, it wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
But it turns out there's a whole debate about how to do it right.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So, like, what's the problem
Right.
with the way we're doing it now?
Yeah, so you might think a container's a container, right?
Yeah.
But the traditional life cycle assessment,
The LCA.
LCA, exactly,
I've heard of that.
can actually lead to some really different results depending on what factors you include in the calculation. So two people could be looking at the same container
Yeah.
and come up with totally different numbers for its footprint.
Seriously.
Yeah, and the white paper gives this pretty startling example.
Oh, and I hear this.
So they calculated one container's CO2 footprint, and they said it could be anywhere between 800 tons and 3,500 tons of CO2 equivalent.
Whoa. Okay, that's a huge difference.
It's a massive range, right?
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, that difference came down to just two assumptions.
Two assumptions.
Just two assumptions that they made in the calculation.
That's wild.
It really is. So now I'm really curious.
Yeah, me too. Tell me.
What kind of assumptions can skew the results that much?
Right. Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, one of the big debates is whether to include something called NOx emissions.
NOx emissions. What's that?
Yeah, so NOx emissions are nitrogen oxides that get released during fuel combustion.
Okay.
And there's just a lot of back and forth in the scientific community, I guess,
Okay.
about how significant NOx is compared to just regular CO2. When we're talking about the impact of air transport, so
Yeah.
if one company includes no NOx and another company doesn't, you can see how their eco-friendly container comparisons could be totally misleading.
Yeah, like, how are you supposed to compare then if everyone's using different data?
Right. It makes it super difficult to compare apples to apples, which is kind of the whole point of having these assessments in the first place, right? Like, if we're trying to make informed choices about sustainable shipping,
Yeah.
we need a reliable way to actually measure the impact of these things.
Absolutely.
So how does this white paper suggest we fix this whole problem?
Okay, well, they make this really interesting point.
Okay.
They say we should just zero in on the operational phase of the container's life.
What does that mean?
So that's basically the part where it's actually being flown around,
Okay.
the transportation phase.
Okay.
Their reasoning is that a whopping 98% of the CO2 impact happens during that phase.
98%. So it's like the materials and the manufacturing process barely even matter.
Yeah, it's a tiny little sliver.
Compared to the actual transportation.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
And that's why the paper argues for a completely new way to measure sustainability for these containers.
Okay. I am all ears.
Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah. Hit me.
It's actually really simple.
Okay.
They say just focus on the weight needed to transport 1 cubic meter of cargo.
Okay.
So lighter container for the same amount of stuff
Yeah.
equals less fuel burned by the airplane,
Right.
which means lower emissions.
Oh, so it's all about efficiency.
Exactly, it's that simple.
That makes sense to me.
Right.
But how do we know if this actually works?
Okay, well, they put it to the test.
Oh, they did?
The white paper includes this table comparing a bunch of different types of temperature-controlled containers,
Okay.
including what are called active and passive containers.
Okay, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
What exactly are active and passive containers?
Oh, that's a good question.
I need a little refresher.
Okay, so active containers are the ones that you probably think of first. They have a built-in cooling system that needs power.
Right.
They're like little refrigerators,
Yeah.
keeping things at a specific temperature.
Gotcha.
And the ones they looked at in this paper were mainly what are called RKN containers.
RKN.
Yeah, it stands for Reefer Container for Pharmaceutical and Life Sciences.
Whoa.
But you don't need to remember all that.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember that.
Just know that they're specifically designed for sensitive cargo like medicine.
Okay.
And then you have passive containers,
Okay.
which just rely on insulation and other clever design features to maintain the temperature.
Okay.
They don't need a power source, so they're often seen as the more eco-friendly option.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So with this new weight-based system, are we seeing big differences in emissions between those two types of containers?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, they found that one of the top performing RKN containers
Okay.
had half the CO2 emissions
Wow. Half.
per cubic meter compared to some of the passive containers that they tested.
So even though an active container needs power, it can still be more efficient overall.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of surprising.
It is. It highlights that it's not as simple as saying, like,
Right.
active is bad, passive is good.
You can't just make a blanket statement
Right.
about those types of containers.
And this new metric lets us look beyond those really broad categories.
Yeah.
And get a much more nuanced understanding of a container's actual impact.
Are you saying that a bulky, poorly insulated passive container might actually be worse than a lightweight, efficient active container?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Interesting.
And there are other types of active containers too, like RAPs.
RAPs.
Which stands for Reefer Air Pallet.
Okay, so many acronyms.
I know, but don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
These are larger containers designed for air freight.
Yeah.
They can carry multiple pallets of goods.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we've got our RKNs for pharmaceuticals.
Yep.
RAPs for larger shipments. And then a whole range of passive containers.
Yeah.
And this new metric lets us compare them all fairly regardless of whether they need power or not.
That is the idea. It levels the playing field.
Yeah.
And encourages everyone to focus on minimizing that weight per cubic meter of cargo.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be a big deal.
Right.
It's not just about collecting data.
Right.
It's about pushing the industry towards more sustainable solutions.
Now you're getting it. Imagine companies competing to create the lightest, most efficient containers.
Yeah.
To get the lowest score on this metric. It could drive some serious innovation in materials and design.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We start with a simple question.
Yeah.
And we end up uncovering a whole new way of thinking about things.
Absolutely.
But let's get back to this idea of companies competing on this new sustainability metric.
Okay.
Wouldn't there be a temptation to kind of fudge the numbers a little bit?
Ooh, that's a good point.
Like if you've got the most efficient container on the market, you'd want everyone to know it.
Yeah, you'd want to shout it from the rooftops.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that everyone's playing fair?
So the white paper actually addresses that.
Oh, good.
They propose that this new metric should be promoted and overseen by a neutral third party.
Okay, so kind of like having a referee
Yeah.
in a game to make sure everyone is playing by the rules.
Exactly. It could be like an independent organization or an industry body that verifies the data.
Okay.
And makes sure that no one's, cooking the books.
Right, right.
That way everyone can trust the results and there's a real incentive to innovate and improve.
Yeah, you need that level of transparency if you want everyone to buy into the system.
Absolutely.
And it's not even just about trust. It also helps create a level playing field for smaller companies.
Right.
That might not have the resources to do their own fancy calculations.
Yeah, their own marketing campaigns.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's not just about making shipping more sustainable.
Yeah.
It's about making the industry fairer overall.
It is. And that's why this new metric has the potential to be huge.
Yeah.
I really think it could change things.
I think so too.
Because it addresses a lot of the problems with the traditional LCA approach.
The old way of doing things.
And it provides a much clearer path forward for the industry.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this.
Me too.
I think it's really cool.
Okay, so for those of us who are just tuning in, can we just recap the key takeaways so far?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just the main points.
Okay. So we've learned that the traditional way of assessing a container's carbon footprint,
the LCA,
can be really inconsistent.
Right.
And lead to some confusing results because of all the different assumptions that go into the calculation.
Like whether or not to include not NOx.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But this white paper suggests a new approach.
Okay.
Focusing on the weight needed to transport a cubic meter of cargo by air.
Okay.
Because nearly all of a container's CO2 impact happens during that operational phase.
Yeah.
This weight-based metric gives us a much more accurate and comparable way to judge its sustainability.
I like it.
Me too.
And the best part is, it's not just about measuring impact.
Right.
It's about actually incentivizing companies to design lighter, more efficient containers.
Exactly.
Which could have a huge ripple effect across the whole industry.
Yes, for sure.
And by having a neutral third party verifying the data,
right,
we can ensure that everyone's playing by the same rule.
Yep.
And that the focus stays on genuine innovation and improvement.
You got it.
This is all fascinating, but I have a question.
Okay, shoot.
What about the rest of us who aren't shipping pharmaceuticals or other temperature-sensitive goods?
Yeah.
Does any of this apply to us in our everyday lives?
That is a great question.
Like, how is this relevant to, the average person?
Yeah, well, this particular deep dive is focused on these temperature-controlled containers.
Right.
But The underlying principles